30 years ago, America was the leader in quantity and quality of high school diplomas. Today, our nation is ranked 36th in the world. What has caused this massive shift in the American education system? In a world full of advancing technologies and minds, students in the United States have become stagnated with unchanging education techniques. According to the 2012 Nations Report Card, average math and reading scores for 17-year-olds have remained relatively stagnant since the 1970s, and that is likely to remain the case for the foreseeable future. In the average American household, students' education is overly simplified into a percentage represented by one of 5 letter grades. Students are treated as a number in a complex web of other students, other numbers. These statistics of our students, our highly stratified numbers, are then used as the basis for which school funding, post-secondary opportunities, and even the student's personal social standing within their school, family, and community are based. As a result from this heavily pressured environment, some 1.3 million American students drop out of school every year. So Mr. Schenkweiler, why did you decide to teach?
Teaching is something that always came naturally to me, and I enjoy working with other people and expanding their view on the world.
Well, what is your philosophy on grading students in relation to their own education and learning?
Well, the grade I assign to a student for a particular task is hopefully a way that I can communicate their progress towards my goals or my standards for what they should be learning at a particular point in time and how they're performing against that standard or rule.
Okay, how do you think grades affect students' confidence in comprehending the curriculum that you're teaching them?
That's somewhat a student-specific analysis. For the average student, or for the typical student, their grade generally is an indication of how comfortable they are. When they get good grades, they feel better about their comfort level. When they get bad grades, that's a signal that maybe they're not engaged enough in the information to reach the goals that they're setting for themselves.
On a slightly unrelated topic, what is your perspective on standardized testing?
I'm not sure that's terribly unrelated. Standardized testing is one tool amongst many for a student to see how they perform against other students outside of their class, outside of their school, and even outside of their state, depending on the test. And it's a tool for educators to calibrate what we do every day and our expectations of students against how students in other states and other areas within our state perform on the same tasks.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Increasingly, modern educators have sought to shift away from this performance-based education system. One of the most successfully integrated of these improved education philosophies is standards-based or standards-reference grading. Conceptually, this system solves the problem of grading students' performance in their own education by replacing the system of scoring assignments with one of evaluating students' knowledge of a regulated standard for that particular subject. In essence, this allows educators to ensure that their students comprehend the content being taught to them, without the potential negativity connotated with traditional grading systems. In practice, though, this so-called improvement is much less than perfect.
As a student, what's your philosophy on education, Ashley?
I believe that education should be about what you believe in and not what the teacher thinks is appropriate to learn, instead of random information I'm never going to use later in life.
Okay, and how do you think standardized testing influences your education?
I think it is not beneficial. It just makes teachers focus on tests and not the actual information. So you don't learn what you need to learn, you just learn what standardized grading rubrics make teachers teach you.
And what's your opinion on standards reference grading like we have here?
I think it's not beneficial to the students. I think it's more beneficial to Adams 12 as a whole. The teachers have to do more work to make the test and grade the test and make the scales, and students aren't being reflected, their learning is not being reflected accurately. If they get an 80%, that's considered a 3, which isn't what it was before. If you get a 90%, that's considered a 3. So it's not accurately reflecting your percentages.
So there's like a 5 to 7% gap that shouldn't be there.
Exactly.
Nicole, as a student, what's your philosophy on education?
I believe that education should just be based on of what an individual believes that they want to learn, rather than what the district wants us to learn.
Okay, and how do you think that the Adams 12 District and Mountain Range are influencing that?
They do it based on what the curriculum is that is set by the district, and therefore the teachers are solely influenced by the district on what they're teaching, and they're not able to cooperate with the students and actually determine at what standard the different students are at, whether they're behind or whether they're ahead of what's going on in class.
Do you think that extends in any way to standards reference or standards-based grading?
Absolutely, because they base all of all the knowledge on these tests, and it doesn't give a relative view on what a student actually knows, and and it's all based on how the teachers are teaching us, and it's solely focused on the teachers and not the students themselves.
Okay, thank you for your time.
In the implementation of this process, schools still have to grade assignments individually, therefore reducing the negative connotation with low scores. In our school, for instance, with the implementation of standards reference grading, the negative connotation of the old ABCDF system has been replaced to a 4-3-2-1 grading system. In fact, because our district was unwilling to eliminate the other standardization, we still receive letter grades in courses, despite the goal of eliminating them.
Mr. Williams, what's your philosophy on teaching your students?
I try to increase relevance as much as I can. I try to take literature that is old or esoteric in some way, and I try to make it as real or as current for them as I can. And in doing that, I try to increase their willingness and, I guess, ability to connect with and to understand literature.
Okay, so how do grades relate to that?
Grades are kind of a necessary evil. I mean, I understand how they're performing or what they know, and grades are required of us to kind of communicate to parents, but a good teacher should always know more than the grade. And so I try to make sure that grades are as accurate as they can be, even if they can't tell the whole story.
And what about standards reference grading?
Standards reference grading in general is a good thing. There are some definite weaknesses to it. It certainly makes it really, really hard to fail a class even when you deserve it. And it makes it really, really hard to get an A in a class. And so it puts teachers in an interesting position. And like a kid who deserves an A but doesn't have one, do you give it to him or not? And so there are definitely some problems with it, but in general, it's a good thing.
Okay. So do you think there's a way to solve those problems?
I think that, yeah. So I think we would get rid of D's. I think that adding the 0.5s in has really helped. But I also think that making sure that students aren't allowed to have zeros. That when we say standards-based grading, we mean that you're not allowed to take an F. And so we would make sure with Saturday school that any kid with a 0 was here until all of the work was completed.
Right. And what about standardized tests?
Again, it's another kind of necessary evil. I don't like them or agree with the idea of doing it, and I certainly don't agree with how they're used, but it's something that we have to deal with now because of political leaders deciding we have to.
Right. But do you think potentially that we're taking too many of them?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I think we take way too many of them, and I think that they don't mean anything to you, and so we don't get a very good effort. I think the ACT is a good example where juniors try out the ACT because they care, but I don't think we can say we're getting their best effort on the mark.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Returning to the modern American standard of requiring a quantitative result from what they are putting time into, as opposed to the qualitative methods for education being proposed, a stigma in relation to receiving a trackable figure has been developed. Until we lose this stigma, we will all be numbers defined by statistics in an inefficient educational system.